Hey everybody, Jerry Williams, aka Greater Sapien here. Thanks for stopping by. And man, oh man, I am so annoyed that work has been busy because it has kept me from being able to do this recap. Because Severance Season 2, Episode 4, Woe's Hollow was something. So, first off, spoilers are incoming, just so you know. Okay. Those who've been keeping up know that in episode 3, the episode ended with Mark beginning the reintegration process. We cut just as we understand that reintegration has been successful. So here we are waiting a week until the next episode thinking, all right, what's going to happen? He's reintegrated. Is he going to have a flood of memories? How are they going to show this reintegration? But this show isn't going to be straightforward for us. It's going to subvert expectations a little bit. And so when we start off this episode, it is not where we thought we would be. No, we open up with the elevator ding and Irving waking up in the middle of a frozen lake wearing winter clothing and not having any idea where he is. He sees Mark standing on a cliff in the distance and they meet up. They are met by Helly and Dylan. Mark says that he was woken up on the ice, and Helly says that she was awakened on the cliff, and that seems to be the case for Dylan as well. There's a great moment with Dylan where he realizes he's outside, and we realize, oh yeah, he has never been outside before. Even when he was briefly awakened during the overtime contingency, last season, he was inside. So there's a brief moment of him, wowing about the outside, and that's actually pretty funny. After that brief exchange, we see that there is a television set up on the neighboring cliff. Now, one thing I want to note is that that television wasn't there in the previous shot. Just a minute or so before, we have a wide shot of them on the cliff, and that television is not there. So when everyone was being distracted by Dylan and his antics, it seems that somebody walked out and put a television there and then skedaddled before anyone could see them. I just find that funny and also weird that Lumen works this way. They walk over to the television, which is an old CRT and is powered by who knows what, and turn on a DVD. The cliff they're standing on looks eerily like the painting of Keir looking out over the valley that Irving said that he found discomforting because he felt like Keir could fall. In an oddly edited short video, Milchick explains that they are going to have an outdoor team building experience with the permission of their Audis, and will spend the next 4 days in the wilderness of the Dieter Egan National Forest. Now, there are two things about this, as none of our team here has ever heard of Dieter Egan, and also the fact that he calls it a national forest, and it's an obvious lie to spin the scale of Lumen's influence even more. It reminds me of how the people in North Korea have spoken about what they were told about the history of the world. The other thing about this video is that not much is said, but for some reason there are like 20 edits. Like for some reason, Milchick wasn't able to read it all the way through. How long have I spoken so far between these edits? It's not that hard, but Milchick just couldn't do it. Also, this video is ominous. I don't understand why they put this moody music and this ominous edit in this video if it's supposed to be an informative team building outdoor excursion. They are told to go to Scissor Cave and they will have help along the way. Shortly thereafter, someone dressed as Mark appears on a nearby cliff and points for them to go in a particular direction. Again, this is something that I find funny, that Lumen has put all this elaborate thing together for these four. It makes no sense to me as a logical thing to do in response to what our team did, and it seems to be a more elaborate set piece for other reasons that we'll probably see later. We don't get the standard Severance opening credits here in this episode. It's almost as if the producers of the show understood that you're already in a weird place. This is already kind of an unsettling turn, so we're not going to break it by putting up our trippy intro. We're just going to let you roll with this. Then we get a full minute and a half of our team traveling through the woods, trying to make their way toward what they believe is this thing called Scissor Cave. And I only bring this up because I like the fact that they take the time and have a minute and a half of time passing here. Now, normally I would find something like this annoying, like the Lord of the Rings, where we didn't need to see so much traveling, and it was quite irritating and indulgent to me. But here, travel is novel for this team. These people have never experienced wilderness, and so giving us a minute and a half to just experience time passing with them is kind of important because this is new for them, and we should understand how big a deal this is for them. I also think it's something that you can't do on regular TV because they have time constraints, and that's one thing you can do in streaming. I think it's great here. They are met by some day player that's been dressed up to look like Helly, and she oddly points to the cave entrance so they know where to go. It's so very obvious a person just barely trying to do a crude imitation of Helly. It's both funny and telling. In the cave, they find the object of their quest, the fourth volume, or fourth appendix of what is apparently, of Kier's book. It's apparently about Kier's twin brother, Dieter, who no one knew about. They learned that their next quest is to follow the brother's footsteps into Woe's Hollow. The team starts traveling again, and as they walk, Irving reads from the book. During an odd passage about Dieter masturbating, they run into an actor made to look up like Dylan with a really bad wig. As the walk continues, Irving lets Mark know that he doesn't quite trust Helly because her explanation of what happened on the outside doesn't make any sense. They come across a dead carcass and wonder what it is and why it's there. It brings the question what these people actually know versus things they have to learn, what they still remember from their regular life or from things they learned over time. Obviously, they don't remember their personal life, but they remember things like a seal exists and it's a particular type of animal and looks a certain type of way. But they don't recognize the decay of an animal after death. It's very interesting. This is also a scene where Irving starts to show that he is really feeling distressed toward the company. While everyone else is trying to act like this is maybe a regular type of occurrence, even though they've never had one of these before, he is ramping up in his emotion. He doesn't trust what's going on and he doesn't understand why the other people aren't feeling it. When they get to Woe's Hollow, they run into Milchek, who tells them that this waterfall is the tallest on the planet, which is just hilarious because it's about the size of an Olympic diving board. As Milchek guides them away, we get one last glance at the four avatars of actors we have playing our team members. And I have to point out the actress who is imitating Helly keeps putting on this really odd pose with her head cocked to the side. And it's not something that Helly does. It's almost as if it's a signal to us that Helly's not quite right. Here's someone doing a bad imitation of Helly. Hint, hint, Helena is doing a bad imitation of Helly. Milchek leads them to a campground where he says they will have marshmallows and a recital. In a conversation with Helly, I'm just going to call her Helly because even though at this point I'm pretty sure that it's Helena, Helly knows that that Irving has an issue with her, and so is trying to ingratiate herself to him by making him a little snow seal. This is Helena trying to sway Irving. But it doesn't work as Irving interrogates her a bit about her outside experience. He asked her about what she really saw. She again lies to him and says she told him what happened. He looks unswayed. She tries a little bit to appeal to him, and then briefly there's a flash, a very dark look on her face. And there is no question that this is not Helly. This is a person who's used to getting what she wants, and Irving isn't complying. Again, it's a great moment of acting on Britt's part here because she goes from someone trying to imitate Irving's friend to someone who can't hide the fact that she is not Irving's friend, to then trying to cover up that bit of reality that had just slipped through. Over the campfire, while Milchek tells stories about out of Kier's book, young Miss Wong, looking like a young Vulcan at a ski lodge, plays the theremin. Of course it's the theremin. This show. Milchek reads a pretty gruesome tale of Dieter's death, and I couldn't help but notice that he seems to be only about 8 pages into this book. He's right at the very beginning of the book, and while Irving and everyone looks very stunned at what they're being read, I can't help but think that Irving should have read that already, because they were walking for like who knows how long, and he was reading this book. Are you telling me he didn't get past page 8 or 9, or whatever page this is, after 40 minutes of walking or whatever they were doing? It's just funny to me that this volume is dedicated to Dieter, and this harrowing story of Dieter's gruesome death is like less than 10 pages into the book. It's funny to me. Anyway, the story talks of Keir Egan's first encounter with the temper known as woe, which I thought up until now was just a concept that they spoke of defeating. Woe is this internal trait that people have and that they need to conquer in themselves. But no, apparently woe was personified by a creepy-looking tiny woman that he encountered in the caves. Okay. Helly insults the story and offends Mr. Milchick. And so as punishment, the ugly, terrible-looking marshmallows get dumped into the fire. Now, I think that Helena did this to ingratiate herself with Mark, because Mark likes a little jokiness, and she's putting on the rebellious face to sway Mark. She's trying to act a little more Helly in front of Irving as well. At this point, when I'm watching the episode, I have to think that Milchick knows this. And so he's playing a game here too, because he knows that it's Helena and that she's just acting, but he still has to do his part of the act as well. Trip. As time goes on, Irving confronts Helly once again about her encounter during the overtime contingency and ends up conflicting with everyone there. And in one particular exchange, Helly says something to Irving that is particularly mean. And while I was watching, there had been very little doubt in my mind about whether or not this was Helena, but it ended, any doubt I had ended here, because the way this woman acts here is not something Helly would ever do. And after that exchange, Irving gets up and walks off into the woods, and Mark and Helly go into the tents. Now, up until this point in this episode, there were some things that were continually going through my mind. One was the newness of this experience this all was for our teammates here. For example, when they prepare to go to bed, my thought was, these people have never been to sleep before. None of them have ever experienced bedding down and going to sleep and having a dream. And so I was thinking about the firsts for them. Another thing that was going through my head this entire time was, is Mark's reintegration going to kick in at some point? Actually, at first, I wondered if this setting was some illusion as part of his reintegration, because it was such a tonal shift from the last episode. But at all times during this episode, I'm wondering, is reintegration going to kick in right in the middle of one of these arguments? So I was always waiting for the shoe to drop. But then I was also thinking about the ultimate reason for this adventure, because it makes no sense. But it makes sense if it's a ruse in order for Helena to get closer to Mark. Because way back when we first saw Helena watching Helly and Mark together, I remarked that it seemed like it might be something that she has never experienced, that she doesn't have anyone in her life. She doesn't have any passion whatsoever, and no one who has passion for her. And so with her inside self experiencing this, there's probably a certain amount of jealousy and longing. And so my thought was, she wants to experience that. She wants to experience something like Mark actually caring about her, which she doesn't experience in her own life. But there's only so much she can do in the office when it comes to that. There's only so much time you can get with someone under those strict circumstances. But if she can arrange to get several days with Mark, alone time with Mark, nighttime and bedtime with Mark, she'll get to experience a full spectrum of a relationship with him in a short period of time. And so that was my thought, that this was all a setup because she wants to experience time with Mark, and maybe toward her ultimate goal, now just speculating here, maybe she needs to get pregnant. The Egan line has to continue. Because in the next scene, the tent scene that comes up, I can't help but see that Helena is really pouring it on toward Mark, like literally giving him the sad kitty eyes in order to seduce him in her crude way. It's a very blatant It's very blatant from the outside point of view, and I think this is what Irving is seeing. But Mark isn't, because he's into it, and he goes for it. Meanwhile, Irving is in the woods looking for Milchick and Miss Wong. And I did wonder where they were staying during all this. They just walked away, but obviously they had to be staying somewhere nearby in case something went wrong. But Irving drops his torch and, with no light, sits down and falls asleep in the snowy woods. And the way this show is going, you have to wonder just for a second if they're going to have him freeze to death. Obviously, you don't think that they're going to do that to an actor like John Turturro, but at the same time, you don't trust this show not to hit you with a gut punch at some point. But then, as Mark and Helly relish in the afterglow of their coitus and prepare for round 2, it happens. Just a brief flash of Mark's view of Helly switching to a view of his wife, Gemma. Reintegration is starting to kick in. But it's only a minor disruption for a brief period of time, and they go back to knocking boots. Cut back to Irving, who wakes up in different clothes in the woods, which automatically let us know that this is a dream. He finds the office cubicle set up in the forest there and sits down at his spot in the bullpen. After having a brief vision of Bert G directly across from him, he looks over to Helly's spot in the cubicles and sees a twisted, crypt keeper in the face looking woman, Woe, from Kier's haunting story. Yes, the demon of a woman is sitting in Helly's spot. And as he looks at his computer screen, the refining data numbers start to reconfigure, and it takes on different shapes. All of the letters are E's, G's, A's, and N's. And at one point, they form into what appears to be a close-up of Helena Egan's face. Okay, Irving knows. He's figured it out. Next, Irving confronts Helena at the waterfall of Woe's Hollow. And by the way, hats off to the cinematography in this scene as they looked at each other through the trunks of the trees. This perfectly parallels the way they look at each other when they are in their cubicles and see each other through the center passageway. It's a great parallel here. Just well done. Irving sums up his revelation with this brief exchange.
What you said to me last night, it was cruel.
Now, I'm going to point out something here. I normally hate it when dialogue is predictable. It's quite annoying sometimes when you see something happening on screen and you know exactly what's going to be said next. But that's because, in general, that's because of lazy writing. But in this case, there was something very true in the characterization of Irving and the situation that he was in. And so when he says this, when I'm watching it, I just a half a second before he says his line, I said it for him out loud because his characterization is so consistent that I automatically knew exactly what his character would say.
Helly was never cruel.
Helena rebuffs him, but Irving has figured it out. You're not Helly. If you're not Helly, then who are you? Who would have the power to send their outie to the severed floor? Mark and Milchick arrive just as Irving is threatening to drown Helena. Irving yells to Milchick to turn her back and repeatedly dunks her in the icy water, threatening to kill her unless Milchick releases Helly. And in just a quick note, that this is a dark parallel. There's a dark take on the scene in the Puppetoon animation back in episode 1 of Helly bobbing for apples. So, after a few dunks, Helena yells back at Mr. Milchick, "God damn it, Seth, do it." Seth being Milchick's real name, and that's something that none of the innies would know. But Helena knows. Milchick grabs his walkie-talkie and tells someone to remove the block that is keeping Helena in charge. Helly's persona reemerges, and Irving pulls her out of the water. Phew. Milchick is more furious than he's ever been seen before. Fires Irving on the spot and tells him to leave immediately. And in an overly dramatic speech, Milchick says they're going to erase any trace of Irving B's existence. Milchick tells whoever's on the other side, the other end of the walkie-talkie, to turn Irving off. End of episode. Now the screen goes black for us, the viewer, but I can't help but think about what just actually happened and the kind of information that comes from what just happened and how Helly and Mark and Dylan are a witness to it. You see, back at the very beginning of the episode, when Irving wakes up on the ice, one of my first thoughts was, okay, how did he get on the ice? I know for a fact that even though Mark said he woke up on the ice, there is no way that Mark or Irving's outside self would walk out into the middle of the ice and just say, okay, you're gonna switch me off now? That's not gonna happen. They may have given permission by from the outside selves to be gone for a few days. Hey Mark, we're gonna have a company retreat with our severed employees, and so we would like your permission to take a few days out of your life to have your inside self be away from your life for a few days. So we're gonna switch you into severed mode. Is that okay with you? I can see that, kind of. But what I can't see is one of them saying, hey, we're gonna do this 3 or 4 day retreat with your severed persona, and it's gonna be in the middle of the icy tundra up north. Can you meet us by the lakeside and then walk out into the middle of the lake, and then we're gonna switch your brain off? Okay? Can you do that for us? No. That didn't happen. Just like right here at the end of the episode, they did not switch Irving back to his outside persona. They're not standing there and then having Irving's outside persona suddenly wake up and turn around and see Mark and Dylan and Helly and Seth. That's not going to happen. So what must have happened is that they somehow switched him off completely or into some other type of mode, like, just motor function only mode, where they can then walk him someplace and put him in a vehicle, send him back to a Lumen building, where then they switch him back on and have him go home. And that's a function that we did not know they were capable of, and neither did Mark or Dylan or Helly. There's got to be some fallout from that. And there's got to be fallout from Dylan's realization that he was so caught up in this one thing that he ignored what Irving was saying. This will probably serve to move Dylan back toward helping his teammates to do what they need to do. And honestly, there's got to be a ton of little things in this episode that I missed. So if there's anything in this episode that you know of, that you noticed that I missed, please put it in the comments. I gotta say, the show is getting better with every episode. Now that we have a little glimpse of the reintegration happening, I'm looking forward to what happens next. I've always been looking forward to what happens next, but I'm looking forward. Anyway, that's it for me. As always, I look forward to hearing your comments, your thoughts. Tell me what you think of the season so far. What do you think is going to happen next? And I will see you next time. Take care, everybody. Peace.